Let's hear
Trying
it
to
from
make sure I
in
get
Arabic.
this right here. So hopefully I'm straight. Um, I guess the previous startup ecosystems we've been talking about have a lot of capital, a lot of activity. I think one that people have not heard as much about is what's going on in Palestine. And I had the opportunity to visit just a few months ago, but maybe, Zohre, you've been working in the region a lot more. If you can give us a little bit of info about what your experiences have been there. Why are you doing this also? Like, what's driving you?
So I started working in Palestine, focusing on education and bringing technology in education in Palestine. Then somehow I got involved with the entrepreneur because in 2008, when Sadara for the first time had the venture capital fund, and at that time, I guess nobody has heard about the venture
So,
capital in Palestine.
really quickly, who's Sadara Capital?
Sadara Capital is run by Saeed Nashef and another founder, Kaufman. They have started it in 2008. And so somehow I started working with the entrepreneur in the level of the high school and universities, because what is lacking in Palestine is from university to the job market. So there are many educated people in Palestine, but they don't qualify to start working in the companies. So we started working with the both high school and students at university to encourage them to come up with the project. We funded them. And that's how we started. Maybe in the future, we wanted to make this pipeline ready for the becoming a good entrepreneurs in the future. But something unique about Palestine that I have to mention, living in Palestine by itself, I think all the Palestinians are entrepreneurs because they have to deal with the many impediments and hurdles every day. So they are all entrepreneurs. There is no doubt about it. Um, Being high-tech entrepreneur is very unique in Palestine. But again, with all the hurdles, like not access to 3G, I know other countries, they don't have access to 3G, but they are fighting for this since 10 years ago. And then there is restriction in movement and access. So today, for example, there were supposed to somebody from Gaza to be here to talk about the Gaza Sky Geek, but he couldn't make it because in Jordan, they didn't allow him to come to Jordan. So there are many things that is the high-tech entrepreneur has to fight for it in order to be successful, but they are going to be successful.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that I was most impressed about was in visiting Ramallah and Gaza, is that there's kind of a determination that is evident and a lot of hustle. I think that's almost necessary given the environment, but certainly a lot of people that are doing quite well.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I was surprised about was maybe because I had a lot of misconceptions as an American, is it's a highly educated population, even though there might be a lot of challenges and some people are, maybe in a situation that's tough economically. But it's a very highly educated population, and probably more so than maybe some other parts of the region that are higher GDP perhaps. So I think that maybe like with Jordan and Lebanon, there's a lot of software development, back office, and design opportunities and skill sets from that population. Um, when you first started going, I guess, well, maybe you can talk about like how is it that a Persian American is kind
I
of
know.
spending time in Palestine, working with that community? How did you get started? I guess maybe a little bit about your background in philanthropy
Sure.
with you and Cameron.
I was working in many different countries, Africa, Middle East, South Asia. And at some point of time, I was managing different projects in MENA region, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, and partly in Iran, the time that I could go back in Iran. Anyhow, I ended up working with the Palestinian because I felt that the need is a lot in Palestine, and I could have seen the result of the work immediately. So it was purely selfish that I ended up focusing on in Palestine and working with the youth, and I enjoy every minute of it.
And I was with you really in Ramallah recently, and I think again, sort of, dispelling a lot of misconceptions. I would have, thought or had ideas about the West Bank and Ramallah that would be more like, okay, this is maybe a war zone, this is a lot of poor people, this is really desperate, and actually, in a lot of ways, it was very similar to other cities in the Middle East that I had visited. We stayed at a five-star hotel or had breakfast there. There was a lot of open areas, a lot of cafes, a lot of people who were very active, and the startups we met with there were a lot more further along than I would have expected. Again, probably made me feel a little bit foolish in kind of my misconceptions about the area, but it seemed a lot more like a developing tech center in the Middle East than someplace that was, quote, disadvantaged or part of a tougher environment.
True, but you have been only in Ramallah. When you come to West Bank, it's from Jenin to Hebron. It's different each cities.
I'm sure.
So Ramallah is unique. Yeah, it's all the startups mainly are in Ramallah. The venture capital, Sadara, is in Ramallah. The other funding, the seed fund, there are 3 other seed funders in Ibtikar, Badr, and there is one, can't remember, Arab Noor. They are all mainly in Ramallah, and but when you go to the other places in West Bank, it's different. And tell me about Gaza. But Gaza was totally different, and
Yes.
I think you were a bit shocked.
Well, I think I wasn't sure what to expect, and an American going to Palestine, much less going to Gaza, is probably not a common occurrence.
Sure.
I think we had a very brief trip. It was scheduled for just morning, about 3 or 4 hours, and I was headed to go over to the Sky Geeks office and do a talk and meet some of the entrepreneurs there and hear some of their pitches. I really wasn't quite sure what I was going to expect to get there. A lot of my other friends were very worried or concerned, I think, and I'm kind of used to going to a lot of interesting places in the last few years. This was maybe on the edge of one that I hadn't really kind of touched before. But I think it wasn't that scary, at least, maybe not until coming back. I think, obviously we went across the border. It was, it's a very different sort of situation crossing over the border between Israel and Palestine. That was an experience in itself. But I was really, it was great to see people who were just really very friendly receiving us on the other side. There's a guy who helped pick us up in one of the cars who had a sign on he had a t-shirt that said, "I'm a nerd, I'm just smarter than you," which I thought was kind of funny. And, in a lot of ways there were just, normal geeks working on startups. At the same time, we went through an area immediately crossing the border that was, a place where there had been bombs that had been dropped. There was a lot of abandoned housing that was, pretty tough. There was a really interesting moment. We passed by a house that actually, I guess Banksy had somehow been in Palestine and had done a art, I don't know, probably not graffiti, I guess, art on the side of a damaged building, and there was probably a 3 or 4 year old kid standing right next to that painting. graffiti, and I caught a picture of both the kid and Banksy's art, which was kind of, I felt a little weird taking that picture, but I think that sort of captured an interesting moment. The car, we had to kind of like figure out how to get through the streets because there was a lot of debris in the roadway and some people who were rebuilding buildings. We actually saw people rebuilding buildings while we were there. But then we got into the sort of central area in Gaza, and there we passed by 2 universities. It was very busy. There was a lot of people that were walking around working, you know, so maybe not quite New York City, but certainly not a destitute area where there's a lot of activity going on. And then we got into the Sky Geeks area, and just again, a lot of, you know, very passionate and enthusiastic people who were really, you know, excited to kind of meet me. I guess I was excited to meet them too. And you know, their companies were still pretty early. There was 1 or 2 that were a little further along. One that was working on a way to do energy from shoes, tennis shoes, I think, or sneakers.
Yeah, exactly.
And a few other projects. One that was for designers, a platform for designers to communicate and work on things. And some people that were working on ideas behind e-commerce projects as well. So, you know, early stage things that we would, you know, maybe want to see develop a little bit further, but certainly smart people working on projects. And again, I think your point about kind of the necessary amount of hustle to operate in those environments was quite impressive. So yeah, kudos to them.
So I remember when we were driving in West Bank in Ramallah area, I mentioned to you, I wanted to show you the walls, and you immediately told me, I don't want to get involved in politics. I'm not involved in politics, but the reason I wanted you to see the walls, that how the entrepreneurs are working in this limited and restricted environment. So that was the reason. And then you find it out.
I think I had a restricted environment as well when I was coming back. I kind of wonder whether Ilyana maybe cut it a little too close on purpose, but we were coming back to the border, and I believe that day was the beginning of a Israeli holiday that was coming up, and so they had 3 days that they were closing. The border was closing early that day. And I was looking at my watch, kind of watching, or my phone watching. We're kind of close to the time when the border might be closed. And they're like, oh yeah, no problem. We got there probably about 20 minutes, 15-20 minutes. We began the journey to which is not like right away that you can get to the gate there, Aaron Gate. You know, I came over with people who, you know, were Arabic speakers, but I was going back sort of by myself, and I was trying to figure out exactly where I was supposed to go, and they were kind of looking at me pretty strange, like, what are you doing here? And eventually I got to the border crossing area, probably with about 7 to 10 minutes to spare, or at least I thought. But there wasn't anyone there, and I guess the person on the other side had decided to take holiday maybe a few minutes early, and that was a very lonely and slightly scary experience. Not scary because, you know, it would have been fine for me to go back to Gaza, and we had friends there to spend time with, but just, you know, looking at, you know, fencing area and security and cameras and this wall, which, you know, had a couple of bullets, or looked like bullet holes to me, and a very, you know, pretty cold gate. I kind of felt like I was a very lonely hillbilly American in the middle of like this area that was not going to be too friendly in letting me back across. And at that point, I took a few pictures. I did have internet service on my phone, and started contacting people both via social media and via phone calls on both sides. And you know, for a while there, I was pretty sure I was not going to get across the border. A lot of the folks on the Gazan side were encouraging me to come back with them and spend the evening, but I had to was trying to get a flight to go to another country. So after waiting for about 2 hours and a bunch of very pitiful tweets, I think, on social media, and a lot of friends who were on both sides trying to help, magically they did actually reopen the border, which was
Good.
sort of strange. But I think I sympathized, or at least got a little small understanding of what it might be like to not be able to go where you want to go.
So that was the reason that you accepted to be part of the Gaza Skycake Advisory Board?
Well, I think that's a really easy decision. I think trying to help people who are working on startups and wanting to help people maybe in tougher spots is, something that's quite easy. I think that was not a hard decision. I was impressed both with Saeed and with Ileana and the efforts that they've had. Ileana is actually an American who had worked at Google and had taken a job with Mercy Corps to help develop Gaza Sky Geeks. Unfortunately, Saeed, who is the other founder of Sky Geeks, can't be with us today. But I think when you see people really putting it out there and trying to work hard to make change happen, that is kind of makes you feel like it's the least you could do to be part of helping out those efforts. And a few other folks from 500 Startups have gone over now. One of them has already gone to Gaza, and another one who's kind of planning to go over soon. So we'd like to hopefully have a few folks get over there if we can.
Great. So what's next? Is there any, probability next geeks on the plane go to Palestine and Israel?
I think so. I mean, I know that the politics of the region are very challenging, and we have a lot of different people on our team. We have someone on our team in Tel Aviv. We have someone here in Bahrain. We have Jordanian on the team back in San Francisco. We have Jewish Americans on our team as well. I think for us, it's important to be a positive symbol of integration and solving problems, and we feel that's important on our team as well as in the companies we invest in. We had an interesting experience at one of our accelerator programs where we had 2 Jordanian companies and 1 Israeli company going through the accelerator program at the same time. And whether people like it or not, I think we were happy that they actually formed some strong friendships and bonds. Those people shared a lot of similar culture. I think sometimes we accentuate the differences, but actually there are a lot of similarities in those cultures that have gone back thousands of years. And occasionally, in Jerusalem, you see those cultures maybe meeting in places that aren't filled with conflict, and there is, at least some level of connection and integration. So my hope is that we can be an active force for change on both sides of those borders. It's a little bit challenging for people to get across those borders. Sometimes it's easier for me as an American to come to Gaza than it is for Arabs to come to Gaza or Jews to come to Arab countries. That's
even
a little
American with Iranian background
right,
cannot easily
right.
go to Gaza.
Yeah. I was kind of waiting to tell the story as I was going into Tel Aviv. Like they're asking me, "Why are you going to Gaza?" I'm like, "Well, this Persian woman is helping me get through Israel to go to Gaza." Like that's going to be a complicated story. I also had about 20, I'm sure, visits to a bunch of Islamic countries as I'm going into Tel Aviv, waiting for them to grill me at the airport there. But I have to say that, as much as I know there's so many challenges going on in the region, there's so many conflicts that, Arab, Jew, Shia, Sunni, other places, I'm still very optimistic about change. I'm still very optimistic about, confrontational, non-conflict resolutions. I'm sure that there's going to be conflict all over the place, and that might not change for quite some time. But I think it's important for entrepreneurs to retain a sense of optimism, and that maybe through entrepreneurship on both sides of those borders in many countries, whether they're Islamic or Christian or Jewish or non-denominational whatsoever, that we can find some solutions. I think it's really important to look at trade and commerce as a way to connect and find solutions. And again, focus on the similarities and not so much on the differences.
And the last word, I know we are out of time, is I really believe that the entrepreneurs in Palestine, they are going to make the transformation of their country into peace. They are the ones that are going to make this to happen. And not only them, the supporter, the investors, like Sadara, like Ebtekar, that they have put their money into these investors, and they know that they might not get return, but they did it because they want to make these changes to happen, and maybe it takes more than 7 or 8 years. They see the result, but they have started it, and this is very important.
Yeah, and I don't think we should look at it as just a charitable effort. I think we should look at it as an opportunity to invest in entrepreneurs who have potential to grow businesses and really are talented people who can, build big businesses. And so it's not just a handout; it's a hand up.
Exactly. So thank you.
Thank
Really,
you. Thank you for
coming to
encouraging me.
Palestine. Thanks.